Welcome to Football Today Team Profile and Projection. And today we're looking at the team that came in 31st in our power rankings, despite having an 8-9 season, and that is your Denver Broncos. Some basic stats and information on them before we get into it. Offensively, they were 19th in points per game, 24th in passing yards, 21st in yards per attempt, 21st in EPA. With the running game, they were 18th in yards, 21st in yards per carry, and the 17th in EPA. And on defensively, they were 27th, 22nd in passing yards, 27th in yards per attempt and EPA, and then 30th in rushing, 32nd in yards per carry. Sean Payton's second year as their head coach after they traded for him. Joe Lombardi's second season as their offensive coordinator, who was the Saints QB coach before with Sean Payton before going to the Chargers for 2 seasons. And then one of the funnier storylines in the NFL is that Vance Joseph is just back on the Broncos already in his second season. Spent 3 seasons the Cardinals DC after the Broncos fired him. This was a team that had a good stretch of football last year, right? They went 6-1 in the middle of the season, and they beat 4 playoff teams, including the Super Bowl champions of the Chiefs, the Bills, the 1 and 2 QBs in the NFL, the Packers, and then the Browns, who had one, maybe the best defense in the NFL. During that stretch, they allowed 15 points per game. On all the other games, they allowed 30, right? And if you wanted, what about just eliminate the Dolphins game, which you can't do. You can't eliminate. You have to eliminate every team's worst game. They still allowed 26 points per game in those other games, which is third worst. And even after that stretch, the Lions dropped 42, Bailey Zappi dropped 26, Easton Stick 9, Aiden O'Connell 7. They bit the Russell Wilson bullet, and they drafted Bo Nix. This is a team that should regress from where it was last year.
Yeah, man. They have to be one of the more complex teams to try and get a read on in the NFL, where they have only 3 players on the roster earning more than $10 million this year, $67 million in dead cap, 53 of it is Russell Wilson. And I'm still sitting here asking myself, Bobby, we've seen Sean Payton be the coach of the New Orleans Saints for a long time with Drew Brees, Hall of Fame QB. We saw it last year with Russell Wilson, and whenever you add Russell Wilson to the mix of things, it seems to just complicate things over the last few years, and he's been on a few teams now.
It was so ugly, but he had good box score stats. It was very wild.
Right, but also there's an off-field component where apparently teammates, guys just don't want to play for him, but still the whole process of Russell Wilson departing leaves a sour taste in my mouth about Sean Payton. We've talked on our regular episodes about Football Today where sometimes instead of this feeling like the Denver Broncos and Sean Payton leading them, it's this is the Sean Payton show instead of it being about the team, and it's about this is about Sean Payton. So I don't know, man. I'm still sitting here asking myself, even seeing years of Sean Payton's offense and even seeing him come back to the NFL after only taking 1 year off, I'm still sitting here saying, and we're going to see it this year with a quarterback that will be crafted to Sean Payton's vision, most likely that being Bo Nix.
Well, yeah. Who do you start at quarterback week 1?
Well, let me even ask this question. What is the image? What is Sean Payton's offense? What does he want to accomplish offensively? I don't know.
It is a question because, one thing Sean Payton's good at was adjusting to the talent that he had, right? Whether that was, Drew Brees in his prime and throwing the ball to Jimmy Graham, or at the end where, it was just crazy low, low average depth of target. But you have to start Bo Nix, right? You don't draft a QB who has been in college since 2019, led college football in completion percentage, to sit for Jarrett Stidham. If you had another type of bridge
Jacoby Brissett.
Yeah, if you had Jacoby Brissett, sure. But you don't do that to sit him for Jarrett Stidham or Zach Wilson, who probably ends up getting cut at the end of the day. But this passing game doesn't scream low average depth of target, right?
But it is, though.
Russell Wilson last year was 8th in deep throw rate. Now, it was very much deep or check down with Russell Wilson last year.
Right.
You had the twilight years of Brees with low average depth of target. Bo Nix also had a crazy low average depth of target. But I think Bo Nix takes more chances than people. I think Bo Nix's film was a lot better than people gave him credit for. It's just you watch him live and in person, and it's uninspiring. And it's a guy who mastered the Oregon system, had a great protection up front. But offensively, Sutton is a guy who can win, but like, and he's been really good down the field, and he's been targeted a lot down the field, and he's been really good at it, right? Having catching more than 50% of deep passes while also getting a lot of volume of them. And a guy who I'm really intrigued by is now that Jerry Judy's gone, Marvin Mims, right? Second round pick by them, never got more than 50% of the snaps.
Oh,
But you thought he was on pace to have this, like, oh, he's going to have a fun rookie year, even if he's not a complete wide receiver yet, right? Like they had a 3-game stretch, and the games weeks 2 through 4, we had 7 catches for 233 yards. That's 33 yards per catch for the kids at home. And then the next 13 games, he had 135 yards combined. You add Troy Franklin, who's a yak guy, and then Josh Reynolds, to hold down the slot. It's how is this offense going to be formulated with Bo Nix and this wide receiver room?
yeah. And one of the things that I tried to answer, at least with on the field stuff, and at least statistically, with this TPP exercise in the prep, is why did Sean Payton not like Russell Wilson despite the efficiency in keeping them afloat? Because really, why Russ ranks somewhat higher in EPA is when you can kind of sustain drives, and especially EPA loves when you don't turn over the ball. Like it loves it, and it does give. I will say a flaw, maybe a flaw of that stat, EPA expected points added, is when hey, if you're an explosive quarterback, but if you throw interceptions, EPA will dock you a little bit. So the highest sack rate that Drew Brees had was 5.4% in 2013 during Peyton's tenure. That's bananas. Bananas. Wilson's sack rate was 9.1%, and he was one of the worst quarterbacks at pocket management last year.
Oh, he was the worst, right? Like
Yeah,
they had the 6th most sacks in the NFL last year, but Russ allowed more pressure in the NFL than any quarterback, which included not just pressure, 16 sacks. 16 owned sacks. That's the most in the NFL. Now, there was, Mike McGlinchey was a clear weak spot on that offensive line, but it was just not a match made in heaven with those two, with the way that Russell Wilson holds onto the ball and takes sacks and ignores the middle of the field, which, Sean Payton likes to, use a lot. Like when everyone's saying, oh, Russell Wilson short, Drew Brees short, good match. And it's like, no. Russell Wilson and Drew Brees are very different quarterbacks.
No, and I think you see that in the time to throw. 25% of the pressures were his responsibility. So, out of almost 1 out of every 10 pass attempts is a sack, Bobby. And an offense that checked the ball down 30% of the time in its pass attempts, I can't imagine that's what Sean Payton wants. And then the crazy thing is that the average depth of target was on the lower side. You would think that's a quick release offense. Russell Wilson held onto the ball for an average of 3.06 seconds time to throw, and his average pocket time was 2.7 seconds. That's one of the highest totals that I've ever seen, according to Pro Football Reference.
Yeah,
so
it was throw the ball deep to Courtland Sutton or run around and check it down.
And you know what? Throwing it deep to Courtland Sutton, at least in the way that I see this offense and the way that I saw it last year, Bobby, and we've talked with other people on our Giant show about this too. Just because you throw it deep doesn't mean that you need to hold the ball for 3 seconds. There's a lot of times, and some of the most effective deep throws is when the ball's out of your hands before 2.5 seconds, and you're just throwing it up for Courtland Sutton to go get. If he's 1v1 against a corner, especially if he has a size advantage, that ball is snap, throw. And that's an explosive play, and that's an effective explosive play. So even that throw designed is supposed to be quick. An offense that checked it down 30% of the time, threw it up to Courtland Sutton in a 50-50 ball, yet Russell Wilson was somehow holding onto the ball for an average of over 3 seconds, one of the highest totals in the NFL. That is one of the, if I had to pick a football way, and not off the field stuff, not as a leader, not in the locker room, if I had to pick a football sense of why Russell Wilson drove Sean Payton nuts, that's what I think it is. And I think Bo Nix is going to be way more decisive than Russell Wilson if he has the confidence, because I think that's what Bo Nix did at Oregon.
Yeah,
he was a point guard.
To me, it's like Bo Nix mastered that Oregon offense, right? And people didn't give him credit for what he did. People, because of how long he spent in college, it was like he kind of became like a meme. Like he had a bad Senior Bowl performance too, which is worrisome, right? Like how are you out of your perfect element? Because Denver's not going to be that. It's just how long does it take for Bo Nix to kind of master this Denver offense? But even when he does, he's not going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. But I do think I don't like taking Bo Nix that high, but I do think Bo Nix and Sean Payton is a good fit.
Sure. I could agree with that. Depending on if this is the kind of offense that Sean Payton really wants to run, which is, a balance of some of those deep throws to Cortland Sutton. Marvin Mims, get Marvin Mims more involved, but especially working the quick game. If that's the type of offense that Sean Payton really wants to run, then I think Bo Nix, out of all the quarterbacks and out of all the options that were there this year, because the Broncos were the team that was most desperate for a quarterback, especially stemming after leaving free agency. They just needed to draft anybody. Bo Nix is the kind of best option for that.
Yeah. Like, if it may not be obviously there's Drake May or Caleb Williams been a better fit for Denver, but for Bo Nix, Denver's a good spot for him. Let's talk about them up front. Like I said, they had the 6 most sacks, but Russ allowed the most pressure in the NFL, including those 16 sacks. They gave Mike McGlinchey that contract, and he was like the clear weak spot on that offensive line, and they had a good center in Lloyd Cushenberry, and they replaced him with Sam Mustipher. I like the left side, or I like the guards, and then Garrett Bowles, right? I know some people may not like Garrett Bowles, but I really like him. And then Ben Powers is solid, and Quinn Miners, right? He's been a really good, and I could see him having like a jump in pass protection in year 3 when we see that for the guards. But I think center and right tackle is a question mark, and I don't view any of those guys as like certified studs in the NFL. Miners, I think, can get his way there, but it's going to be a lot tougher for Bo Nix than here with Denver with this offensive line compared to Oregon. But I don't view this offensive line as like this is every team, every fan base thinks their offensive line sucks, and some are true. But I don't view this Denver group as a debilitating offensive line. It's just not a very good one.
No, nothing really sticks out to me either. Besides Quinn Miners, like he was a Senior Bowl guy, and was he one of the guys that I'm going to walk around with my belly out and have a funny face and a funny look, and maybe I'll be a good football player? But it turns out that he turned into a good one, and I'm happy for that story. That's pretty cool.
With the run game, I think Javonte Williams is going to bounce back coming. Like this, again, we talk about the ACLs, especially for running backs. He's coming off of that. But you still need to see more out of Javonte, but I love his talent. And then you get Audric Estime, who's just going to run through cats and add a toughness to the room.
I love that. Yeah.
Do you think this is a team that tries to lean into the run game a bit?
Oh, yeah. They have to. You're not going to have Bo Nix throw 25 attempts a game. That's not going to happen, I don't think. 30. I forget the number of attempts per game is lower than you think in the NFL for quarterbacks. It's not going to happen. Especially because this is a team that they ran 11 personnel last year, 56% of the time. Like, part of the reason why we need to figure out what the identity of Sean Payton is going to be, because if you're going to check down the ball and try and run quick game and throw it in the intermediate to short level, not even intermediate, throw it in the short level of the field 30% of the time, you're only going to run 11 personnel 56% of the time in a stacked AFC with really, really good quarterback play, and you're going to try and be this run first team. Like, what is the like? Not even talking about the ceiling for them this year, because they don't care about this year. What is the ceiling for them in the long run? Like, but I do think for 2024 they're going to try and be a run first team, kind of because they have to.
Yeah, it's just like, how much faith do you have in Bo Nix is really the question mark of it.
Now the defense, though,
the defense, and there's some
underrated fun.
The front is underrated fun.
Yes, I agree. Yes,
but this was like, oh, the defense bounced back, and like I said, they finished the season very poorly. You remove the Dolphins game from outside of that 7-game stretch, and they still were a very bad defense, but they did get better.
Weeks 4 to 16, though, they were 10th in defensive EPA per play.
Yeah, they had, they had that stretch where they went 6-1 and they allowed 15 points per game, which is just would be top of the NFL.
Can I talk about their front?
Yeah, their front has a bunch of different guys, and like you said, it's a fun group where they can rotate and play a lot of different players.
Yeah,
who do you like the most out of them?
Well, I want to go through it because I want to talk about a guy that I can see as breaking out this year. Zach Allen and John Franklin Myers as defensive end. Allen has been a 5-sack, 20-plus QB hit guy the last 2 seasons. John Franklin Myers joins from the Jets, who's been a solid all-around player for them. Obviously, there's less talent. You're not playing next to Quinnen Williams here. But it'll be interesting to see how he kind of transitions. But I don't even think they need him to play kind of like full time. Nick Benito. I could see getting 10 plus sacks after a really, really solid year 2. He got 8 sacks last year, 20 QB hits on only 52% of the snaps. He has a fast first step, Bobby Skinner. Jonathan Cooper is another 8.5 sack guy. Plus, I love Baron Browning. He's like a do-it-all kind of guy, jack of all trades, master of none. And then Jonah Ellis joins them from Utah as their 3rd-round pick as well. Nick Bonito is the guy that I like the most, I am most intrigued by, because you saw the athletic upside at Oklahoma, but it was like, you got to put some stuff together. You need some moves, maybe a little undersized.
When he was played stack, like they have a type. Take a stack linebacker who's quick and small and move him to edge, right? Those are both kind of tweener guys at 240 pounds. Yeah. But they're both like good pass rushers with their speed, right? And Baron Browning, like he like he's probably my favorite of those guys, right? He missed 7 games last year after, missing 6 his first 2 seasons, but like he can rush in multiple different ways, and he's still fairly new. Like he played stack linebacker there his first year for them, right? So this is only his 3rd year of just playing flat out edge, where he played that overhang position at Ohio State. Like you said, they have a nice group up front, right? Even Malcolm Roach, right? He didn't get a lot of snaps, but he had the highest run stop rate in the NFL for defensive tackles last year. Again, didn't get a lot of, not a huge sample size, but like they have a nice group of guys that they can rotate, keep fresh, and just throw different. Like they're going to keep offensive linemen on their heels with the different types of players and the versatility of rushes that Nick Bonito and Baird Browning and Cooper can use.
Additions and losses?
Well, I want to talk about their linebacker
secondary.
Room. They got rid of Josie Jewell and added Cody Barton. Alex Singleton is still there. He racks up a ton of tackles, but I don't like. He had the most missed tackles in the NFL. He's like a huge negative in coverage. I think that room they're going to really rely on their front, but coverage wise, Vance Joseph's going to blitz and play single high coverage, right? Vance Joseph, blitzed the 5th most in the NFL last year. The secondary, to me, I just don't. I don't feel great about it with some of the, like, Patrick Surtain Jr. is their best player in their defense, but he did have his worst of 3 seasons in the NFL last year. But still, we know that Patrick Surtain's a good player. You got Levi Wallace, Jaquan McMillan's one of the best run defending nickels in the NFL. They'll blitz him a lot, but in coverage, he's nothing crazy. And then they replaced their safeties with Brandon Jones from the Dolphins. He's probably their 2nd best coverage player, but some of his best years were, playing in the box with Brian Flores, right? When Brian Flores used him as a box safety, where he led the league in sacks, hits, and pressures from the safety spot. Now Javon Holland, his teammate, was 2nd, so it speaks a little more to the scheme of Brian Flores. But like he was capable of doing that. But yeah, additions and losses, and this is where I'm a little worried about this team. They added Zach, and this is free agency, not draft. Zach Wilson, Josh Reynolds, Sam Mustafer, Malcolm Roach, Cody Barton, Levi Wallace, and Brandon Jones. They lost Russell Wilson, Jerry Jeudy, who really frustrating, but a good player in the NFL. Chris Manhertz, Lloyd Cushenberry, Josie Jewell, Fabian Moreau, Justin Simmons, and Kareem Jackson. That's where I worry, is like, let's just eliminate quarterback from it. They downgraded in every position of loss and addition, right? Jerry Jeudy's better than Josh Reynolds. Lloyd Cushenberry's better than Sam Mustafer. Josie Jewell's better than Cody Barton. Fabian Moreau, Levi Wallace, that's a throwaway. And then, but you lost Justin Simmons and Kareem Jackson. That's better than adding Brandon Jones. Is that it's like every single one's a downgrade. And I look at their draft too, and I don't see anyone who's going to come in and be a starter right away outside of Bo Nix.
No, maybe like Troy Franklin. I like Audric Estime. I mean,
but again, he's going to be the number 2 to Javonte Williams, or at least
getting him on day 3. Is somebody that I like, but in the year 2024.
Yeah, I don't hate their draft big picture. Jonah Ellis, I'm not like that's where he belonged. Troy
they didn't have a second round pick.
4th round pick. They didn't have the second. We'll see what happens with Bo Nix. Estime in the 5th round's a great pick. I'm not familiar with the 2 7th round picks, but I don't think any of those guys outside of Bo Nix and maybe a little bit of Troy Franklin makes a big impact on year 1.
No, I mean, with Russell Wilson taking up $53 million in dead money and then $32 million in dead money in 2025 as well.
It's a gap year for them.
I don't know how focused the Denver Broncos are on really going out there competing. But man, like you said, before we get to X Factor over under, I mean they beat the Bills, Chiefs, Packers, Browns, and Vikings last year. It's insane, and they won it off of defense. And you could, Justin Simmons is a big loss. If Pat Surtain's not playing at an All-Pro level, that secondary is really concerning. But that front just entices me. It's one of the more underrated fronts in the NFL that nobody talks about, and I wasn't even talking about it until I actually looked at it and did prep for this. So
yeah, I don't think that defense. Well, there's no defense as bad as that 70-point outing and the way how ugly it was beginning of the year. But I do look at that 7-game stretch as more of an aberration, right?
okay,
Like I just don't have the most faith in the world in Vance Joseph, and without the talent, right? Now they're gonna have good stretches, but I think overall, like they might have another stretch where they're like, look, they're giving up 17 points per game and over 5 games. But I think overall, it's so reliant on that front and blitzing that they don't have, to me, the talent, at linebacker and in the secondary to continue to win like that. They'll have
no,
some good games, but
even forget. No, let's just talk offensively here. We have different EPA numbers. I had them 20th in offensive EPA per play.
My EPA is passing total and then rushing total.
Okay. I have EPA per. I like rates. I like rates better than totals, by the way. And then points per drive, they were 21st last year. So forget the defense. Like, do the offense is going to be worse than that, right? Like they're going to be 24, 25, 26, right? At kind of at best.
Yeah, I mean they downgraded on the offensive line. They downgraded in the receiver room, and but let's say you really think Bo Nix is going to operate this a lot better than Russell Wilson, which is not the craziest thing in the world to say. We didn't lose, the best version of.
But this is operating a boring offense better, and that's why I need the question to be answered of what is Sean Payton, because if Sean Payton is just straight up fucking boring, checking it down 30% of the time and throwing up 50-50 balls, that's fucking Jason Garrett.
But no, to me that was more of a Russell, like it was
okay.
Frustration with Russell Wilson, where it was ignore the middle of the field, throw the ball deep down the sideline, run around and check it down. Like I don't view that stuff as like, oh, that's what Sean Payton wants to do, right? Like Sean Payton, this is where I do give Sean Payton credit, he is someone who what he does is fits to his players, right? If he's got a great tight end, this offense is going to run through the tight ends of Jimmy Graham. If we got Brandon Cooks, we're going to run a lot through Brandon Cooks. Like Sean Payton, and with his quarterbacks, I think he is someone who adjusts to his players very well. So that's where it's like, I don't really look at like schematically what they did on offense is like, okay, this is what Sean Payton wants to do now. I think this is the year we're going to find out because he drafted the quarterback in the first round.
Right. Which brings me to my X factor, because you said, who are we going to run the offense through? My X factor is Courtland Sutton. Only 55% of the targets went to wide receivers last year. That was 27th in the NFL. And the main question is for this offense, how can they get more explosive? Where and how is it going to come from? I do think this offense is going to be worse statistically. There's some things where it could look better. There's some metrics that it can look better. And things may move really fast for Bo Nix. Like it's not a stretch to say that a guy that mastered Oregon's offense, may have a transition to the speed of the game in the NFL. I don't think that's a stretch. But I think Sean Payton needs to slow it down for him. And honestly, like you look at Courtland Sutton's numbers, I saw some of the highlight plays that he made last year. It's not awesome. And he's been around for forever. I mean, he had a year 2019 where he received over 100 targets, 72 receptions, 15.4 yards per reception. And that's good. And he caught 10 touchdowns last year. I think Courtland Sutton's got some good, maybe not wide receiver one like alpha, but Courtland Sutton's got some dog in him. And I think it could come out. And I think if he's a big help to Bo Nix this year, that could go a long way for his progression.
Oh yeah, I like Courtland Sutton a lot. For what he is, right? I'm not going to pump him up with something more than what he is, but I really like Courtland Sutton. I mean, he's probably the best player in that offense.
Yeah, so he needs to be
right.
Like
unless you want to argue
more than just a 60 catch guy, in my
unless
opinion.
you want to argue Quinn Miners. My X factor is Javonte Williams, right? Like he has the ability to be dynamic. And we saw a little bit, and then he had the ACL. So this is his first year, being fully recovered from that, over a year away from it. Javonte Williams is my X factor, and a team that I think is going to want to run the ball quite a bit. Over under 5.5 wins.
Yep.
I'm going under. I think this team could be picking first overall.
Yeah, I've changed my mind. I initially said I want to say under, but I was like leaning at 6 because it's like, dude, I think the defense could be solid, but I've talked myself into not believing in Sean Payton as much as I do. I'm going to say under. It's a big year. Like maybe he can prove me wrong, but I'm also going to say under. The Broncos aren't mentally focused on 2024.
All right, and that is a team profile and projection. That is the Denver Broncos, and that was football today.